What's up, lemon heads? Welcome back to another episode of From the Yellow Chair. I'm Emily, and this week I'm flying not completely solo, but Crystal's not with me in the virtual lemonade stand today. It is peak travel season, but I do have a very special guest with me today, someone who is super creative, a fantastic wordsmith, someone who's very passionate about branding, a real wizard, if you will. So let's just dive right into it. Let's sip some lemonade. All right. Okay, like I said, today I have a very special guest, Ryan Chute. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, how are you?
So good. And I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. So I kind of hinted at it that you might be a wizard of sorts, but you are a partner in the infamous Wizards of Ads, right?
Yes, I am. I joined them back in 2017.
Awesome. Well, Crystal and I admire a lot of the work that you guys do and put out. It's definitely inspiring and something to help keep all of our tools sharp and just, be competitive, not competitive in a bad way, but to always be getting better and things like that. So, Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey and why you're kind of an expert and so passionate about these things?
Well, I grew up in an entrepreneurial world. I worked in the gulags of retail for many years and helped run the family business in time, and eventually spread my wings and got out into the international market, teaching people sales and marketing all across the globe. I've been in 4 different continents and 8 different countries, teaching people and helping companies really grow their business. Back in 2015, I took a look at what we could do to bring that home and be a little bit more domestic, and started taking classes with Roy and at the Wizard Academy in Austin, Texas, the not-for-profit school that they run there. And we got along and connected really well. And 2017, about August, I reached out to him with a 3-sentence email that said, "Can we talk?" And we talked for many hours, a number of times, and he invited me to become a partner in October of 2017. Not just to do the marketing side of things, but to bring the sales and culture components and align them with what was already being done so brilliantly by our writers and our media buyers. So that's really what we have evolved this to, is taking it to the next level and having a really strong brand through culture, through good operations, and those wonderful experiences that customers are getting are the stories that we get to tell at Wizard of Ads.
That's awesome. No, I love that. And one thing that I was reading on your website, you said the best brands are the brands that portray the truth. And I could not agree more. Like brands that are authentic and can really tell a story. But what I loved right after you put after that is like, but are you doing something that is worth telling a story about? Like, how are you setting your business apart? And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't try to go that extra mile. They're just kind of status quo. I just do good work. I'm going to provide good customer service. That's the extent of what makes them different. So, how do you kind of encourage companies to dive a little bit deeper, if you will, and find that unique nugget to build a brand and to build a story upon?
Yeah, those. I mean, everyone talks about the unique selling propositions, or the what we call skimp, or that definable different thing that you're going to do that no one else is going to do. And it's typically not just one thing; it's a couple of things. But what we've discovered over the last 35 years or so of doing this is that your best businesses are the businesses who are operationally excellent. These are companies who really do an efficient job of delivering the service. That doesn't mean that they're the cheapest price. That means that they're doing it in an efficient way so that the price that they do charge is high value, right? And ultimately, that's exactly what we're trying to do with any of our customers, and really trying to knock it out of the park with something that stands them 600 feet above the competition. What are they willing to do that the competition isn't quickly and easily going to be able to immediately say, "Me too, we do that. Of course, everybody does that." Right? And that's where we're taking table stakes off the table. Right, the convenient hours and the friendly staff and the expert technicians and all of this other stuff that everyone says is off the table. It's not
It's a
going
given
to
at
move.
this point.
Exactly, and these are the exact same things that we hear about so often when people say that they're building their brand. I just want to deliver a really good service, and we care more. Well, no one cares that you care more, and frankly, no one believes it. So, what are we going to do that's going to be different? We're going to show, not tell. So, not my client, of course, but Roy's client, famously, Morris Jenkins, has done an amazing job at demonstrating that they're open late 7 days a week. Now, they didn't do that by saying, we're open 7 days a week till midnight. They did it by showing a TV ad that showed 11:48 at night, and it's dark out, and Mr. Jenkins and Bobby are sitting in a truck talking about what they stand for and what they stand against. Well, that does the thing that we're looking for it to do without saying it, right?
Correct. Without being so literal about it.
Without being so quite literal in the sense of like saying that you're in business for 75 years. No one cares, right? Because anyone who opened it 75 years ago is surely dead, right? And and it doesn't matter what it was 75 years ago. But what we can do is we can talk about something that my grandpa taught me about this business, right? As a third generation plumber, my grandpappy told me this, right? We did this with Gettle. And by we, I mean Roy and his writing teams really put together a super strong story about him learning from his father at an early age and how that impacted how he stands for and what he stands for in the business today. Right. And we create those very, very important elements, those symbols like Sadie the dog, like little boy in a flashlight, and those we use those symbols as representations of what we stand for and why we're of value compared to the competition.
No, for sure. That's fantastic. And I think it just takes a little bit of an intentionality to find that story. But then when you pair up with a creative mind, that's when they can run and take with it. I saw you were talking about Gettle, and I saw a little culture card that they had or whatever. And they had built their acronym for their culture on Sadie's name, like SADIE. And so, not only will you see Sadie the little dog, but like it's ingrained in their company culture and things like that. And so it's way more than just what the truck wrap looks like, or and they tell that story by delivering the old fashioned flashlights and things like that. It's a full compass, completely ingrained brand, not just a logo.
Well, and this is what we're bringing to the table as Wizard of Ads, not to make this a sales pitch, but to really understand that marketing is far more important than just the marketing department. It's far more important than just lead generation. It's far more important than writing radio ads. It's about bringing sales, culture, and marketing together under a unified, aligned, single brand and speaking truths about it. The red screw is a symbol of the truths that the Gettle stands for, the little details. The flashlight is a torch being passed down, right? Which harkens back to a 1936. They had nothing to do with Gettle back then. He just worked on Gettles. He really liked Gettle, and that's one of the big reasons why Ken really wanted to buy that brand. So what we're looking at is what's true about everything that Ken has said. His story is true, but we bring truth into it through this symbology. And that doesn't speak just to the customer. That speaks equally as much to the employees, because when we have a culture that supports this, they deliver the buying experience. And it's the buying experience that we can bank on for our future marketing.
Well, no, for sure. And I think, the sales and the culture and the marketing, they all tie together, but they all really work best. And you mentioned at the beginning with that operational excellence, and I'm sure this is like, if the operations is struggling, like it's like a three-legged stool, like it's wobbly, your marketing's not going to perform. Or if it is performing, you can't actually execute it. So like if we're making the phone ring, you're not going to be able to service those calls, And so, I think a lot of times contractors are looking for marketing or looking for branding. I'm going to reinvest in getting this new brand and rewrapping my trucks, but they don't look at themselves and like look at the operational aspect of it. They hope that that's just the magic fix. Snap my fingers. I'm going to invest in branding or marketing, but they have to have that operational side to make the other part successful, right?
Absolutely true. And look, if you have a brand aesthetic, what we call a visual style guide, you have logos, wraps, colors. That's a very important component and a valuable component. But if you have a story without words, without a voice, you don't have a brand. You have pictures, right? Your logo isn't your brand. Your truck wrap isn't your brand. The stories you tell are your brand. The pictures are representative of the story you tell, not the other way around. This is one of the big challenges that we face when we're dealing with companies who paint their pictures first. They draw all the stories to their storybook, and now it's up to us to write the story from the pictures. It's backwards only in so much as it's not necessarily genuine to their real story. We have a company that talks about their brand being something that is completely incongruent with what the owner actually stands for and believes in. And that's really hard to tell a story. We can tell that story, but it's not the owner's story, and it's not what the employees or the customers experience when they interface with that company. And that's important, right? Because it's not the first sale that matters. The first sale is the hardest. It's the second sale that matters. Them coming back and referring you unsolicited, giving you 5-star reviews that builds your business, right? And it's far more important that customers are shopping with you because they know you, like you, and trust you, not shopping with you because they know you and don't trust you and don't like you, right?
Correctly. You want to develop raving fans, people that can be almost like an advocate for your company, you know? And I think that's kind of when you invest in the good marketing to get them initially, and then you have the great operations to win them and then to keep them when they do become that raving fan, that's the marketing, if you will, I'm doing air quotes here, that's going to continue out for so much longer that you can't pay for that. Like, that's when you've ultimately, I think, been successful in all these efforts leading up to it thus forward, and it can continue on for so much longer.
Well, here's the biology behind raving fan, right? We get a customer with dopamine, right? We and have them anticipate something good from an otherwise bad situation in the home service industry and in consumable goods and Lululemon pants and all those other things. It's a different play. We're playing a different strategy. But we have this dopamine lift, right? We arrive in the home, we try to maintain that dopamine lift. That gets you a customer. That doesn't get you a raving fan, a loyal fan, a referring fan, or a 5-star review fan. What it gets you is somebody who's going to pay you since you're in their house, and hopefully you can convert them that day. After dopamine wears off, and that could be after the second or third time you visit the customer, maybe you get them on a club membership, maybe you don't. At the end of the day, visiting that customer regularly, the bonding has to shift, right? That chemical goes from dopamine to what we call the here and now chemicals. Now, the here and now chemicals in the biology of the body include endocannabinoids, endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin, and even testosterone. And these are the things that make you bonded to a person. These are the things that make you love a person. This is the things that make them loyal. Most companies never ever get to the here and now. They play the one night stand until people are tired of the booty call, and then they go on to the next home service company, right?
Well, that's the quote that we're gonna have to do the segment out for, like, the reels. Is that they're tired of the one night stand booty call.
Right?
No, but you're so right in that. You are, for sure. And yeah, thank you for explaining that whole science, and all those chemicals that create that reaction to us and stuff. So we've talked a lot about hero brand and how to, like, tell that story and extrapolate it and make something completely unique. But what are some ways that you can actually, like, implement it now? You guys are fantastic at creating kind of out of the box campaigns and things that you would never think about in the very traditional sense, especially with, like, the super sexy HVAC technician, and air quotes again. But what are some ways that you guys implement these out of the box campaigns, and what is your train of thought when you're developing? How can I really put a spin on this to further tell this story?
Yeah, well, it starts off with visiting with the companies and really getting past the small talk that you hear, all of the normal conjecture, all of the normal stuff about their great technicians and caring more and we get things done and all that other stuff that everyone says. And trying to find that real nugget of something that they stand for, something that they stand against that we can leverage within the actual messaging itself. And we use that as the anchor. Now, other things come from that. Iterates of that come things like sump pumps and drain clearings and all of those types of things. But the core message stays the core. There is that ongoing anchor because what we're trying to do is we're trying to take all of the things that they're hearing about from us periodically, social media, lead generation, other kinds of platforms where you're getting your message out there in an inconsistent kind of way or a periodic kind of way. And we're trying to get that repeated over and over and over again in a mass media. So it goes from the electrical part of the brain, the upfront part of the brain that's like the RAM of a computer that stores things but gets erased with sleep over a 7-day period, and get it back to the chemical part. So that means we have to repeat it a lot and we have to repeat the same thing over and over again so that people start to remember us for that thing, right? The weird difference between an externally triggered grudge purchase like home services and buying Lululemon pants is that the motivation only happens when something goes wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
An external trigger happens where Lululemon pants is very often an internal trigger, right? That's an emotion positive resonance buy versus a negative resonance uh, requirement. I begrudgingly call you because I have to, right? So if you're lucky enough to be their guy, then you get the phone call without the pay-per-click costs and the competition. If you're not their guy, then they're going to go searching and they're going to close their eyes. They're going to point and pick something off of a list on Google. We create the brand so it's their guy, right? So ultimately, the thing about it is we need to get you living involuntarily, automatically being recalled when the trigger happens. Now, there's a dozen different devices that we use to do that, from entertainment and foils and putting customers on the air, doing origin stories, and all kinds of other different devices and tactics. The key is that we don't hire ad writers, we hire storytellers, people who understand screenwriting and poetry and fine art and photography and understand what draws a person in gravitationally.
No, that's amazing. And I love how you say that is not ad writers, but storytellers, and we've been elaborating it on so long, but that's ultimately what it is. Telling stories. And to me, telling stories is the greatest business of all time, if you will. And it's what's been passed down from generation to generation, since the beginning of time. It's always been a story, and the way you tell it and how it's carried on for generations and stuff. And so I absolutely love that. Um, could you share with us maybe one of your favorite campaigns that you've done and like kind of how y'all have implemented it?
Oh gosh, there's quite a few campaigns that I really enjoy. Um, One campaign that I would argue is one of my absolute favorite is one that writer Johnny Molson does for us out
Mhm.
of Columbus, Ohio, called Apex Pros. And they started off as a plumbing company. Now they're a full service company. And he this was a family of brothers who incredibly ambitious, ridiculously smart, well resourced, and knew exactly what they were doing from the moment they were getting into it, having no idea how to run a plumbing business, but sure as heck knowing how to run an operationally excellent business. And that was the real key for them, is that they're just profoundly good at what they do and then found the right people to deliver on the thing that they believe in. They keep their systems really straightforward and clear. You understand exactly what they're doing, and they keep things set up into a very simple coping mechanism strategy. So they're not trying to overwhelm you with a bunch of extra. They made themselves incredibly accessible to getting into the house. So we used humor in that campaign. These guys have an amazing sense of humor, and they're open to being cheeky, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it was very true to them, and we knew that the service that we were going to promise was going to be serious, was going to be a real thing. So what we were doing was making fun of the situation from other places very often, or the situation at hand. A clogged toilet was the end of the world, and the man was going to just like die in his bathroom because his toilet wouldn't work. And he has a helicopter coming in from Luxembourg, and it's going to take 6 to 9 months after you take the back wall out to fix this HVAC system. And it's going to require some, some small explosives, and over characterizing, over dramatizing, saying ridiculously unrealistic things is really, really powerful when you don't have the owner involved in the actual stories,
That's right.
because an owner can't say that about themselves, but a character can say that about the situations at hand. And by blowing these things up into something silly and funny, it makes a person laugh. The second half of the ad is all about anchoring it to the brand aesthetics that we were handed, and then delivering on the who you going to call narratives for call to action at the end. Never, ever, ever placing an offer into it. On the rare occasion an offer comes through, maybe twice a year, but 9 times out of 10, or I guess 10 times out of 12, we're going to see the character really just delivering on the we're the ones you call when something goes wrong, right? And people adore them, and they've grown their business just by heads, leaps and bounds.
No, that's for sure. Well, and I remember working with you guys on a campaign with Johnny, and it was for a client, and they were really trying to push their no breakdown guarantee. And so we were doing this whole billboard campaign, but instead of just plastering no breakdown guarantee on the billboard, that would it did say that, but it was very small. But the main graphic, the hero image was like an evil Knievel type foot going over this monstrous gap that was like, do you feel confident that you're not about to break down as you're about to go through this a massive jump? And then another picture that went along with it, it was during the winter time, was a kid licking the pole when it's frozen and his tongue getting stuck, and is like, do you have the confidence that it's not going to break, you're not going to get stuck out in a bind, things like that. And so you're still, and that's somewhat of an offer, if you will, the no breakdown guarantee, but it's like doing it in creative ways that's sticking out way more so than Joe Blow down the street, who also has a no breakdown guarantee.
When the big difference of what you just spoke to was that Johnny knows how to make people feel,
Yeah.
right? And that's what storytelling is. And if your advertising is just telling, you're not actually making them feel anything. The trap, the risk that most people get into, that they fall into when they're trying to make people feel, is that it's cute and clever without context. It's not strategic
Mm-hmm.
feeling, it's just random feeling. So they remember the ad, but they don't remember who said it. And that is catastrophic when
Yes.
it comes to the success or failure of a campaign. These are the things that we're factoring in when we're trying to get a person to remember the name, right? One of the things that we're going to do strategically to help them do that, the name and or the domain, because the domain is really what we're really trying to get the customer to do. That's your subtle call to action, something that Dan Antonelli, by the way, does brilliantly with his team at Kickcharge. And that's to put the things like call, ABC plumbing .com, and having the call to action in the domain. Well, we're going to take that one step further and create a completely originally scored jingle for it,
Yeah,
because anything you sing, you remember.
that's right. Well, and everyone loves a good song, and someone, when you hear a song on the radio, like, it takes a time or two before you can actually like sing along with it. Like, oh, that's catchy, but like I can't remember the words to it. So like you have to have that repetitive and consistency in all of your marketing and advertising, to be able to tell your brand, so that, like you said, they can remember the campaign, but then also remember who said that campaign, who was doing that. And then I think even just cleverly, because like we even illustrated the Evil Knievel jump. Like, instead of it being the traditional red and white and blue that Evil Knievel was, like, we recolored it into their brand colors, like orange and yellow and things like that. So it still played the same picture, but it's putting that spin on it and stuff. So, um,
There's actually 12 languages that the mind comprehends information with. So, of those 12 things, there's primary, intrusive ways that we can do it, and then there's secondary and tertiary things that we can do. So, having the evil Knievel chasm is step number one. It's telling that emotional story. It's like, ooh, that angst that one builds up. Level two is the color scheme. Level three, logo, so a symbol, right? How big the logo is in proximity on the board. Proximity is a language of the brain. And this is a 2-day course that Roy teaches at the academy, but it really does get quite fascinating when you start understanding the constituent parts. Then you can speak to them very easily. And that's what our guys do nothing but train on and do day in and day out.
Yeah. Well, another nugget that I really liked reading on your website is, you put who you work with. And so with a lot of home service industry contractors and retailers, but what I loved, who you will not work with, and jerks. But then what I loved, the very last one was, you're not going to work with committees. And I was like, oh man, that speaks volumes, because leave it to a committee to shoot down a fantastic idea or implementation, or it takes so freaking long to decide, that and paralysis by analysis, if you will. And so tell me why that's so important to you that you had listed out, I'm not going to work with committees. How have you seen committees shoot down a brand?
Committees are the best intentioned, right? They're there to protect you. Committees are there to make sure that you don't make a mistake. And when you're doing something bold, when you're doing something that risks offending somebody, Ken Goodrich's commercial about a little boy and a flashlight has offended hundreds of people over the years. Offended hundreds of people. Are we going to be concerned about that? The answer is absolutely no. Are we going to water it down to become invisible? The answer is absolutely not. So you do have to have a bit of courage to do the things that we do. We know what the lines are. We know how far we can take it. We know how, and our clients in some cases are going to be very specific about, we can't use that particular word here, but we can use an iterant of that word. We had a commercial that ran on television that was about the worst case scenario, and ultimately his daughter would end up living in a in a neighborhood where it smelled like sausage, right? And who, who wants that? That's disgusting, right? Right. So, and then it gets resolved by the end because the best case scenario is to use this company. Well, don't we get a person who complains about our neighborhoods don't smell like sausage? And of course they don't smell like sausage. That's a bit of a silly thing, right? You go down in the rabbit hole of finding out who the person is. And of course it's a real estate agent in town who's terrified of, ruining her brand. So we carry on with the ads as expected. We had one campaign where we promised that we were going to get 27 complaints from somebody, right? Because it was aggressive, right? It was out there, but it hit it really hard. It made people feel. Well, they got 23 in before the bus company pulled the ads. So we were a little disappointed we couldn't get to 27 because they physically pulled the ads because their committee had decided that these ads weren't appropriate for the situation. They were not offensive. They weren't bad. They weren't evil. They weren't saying anything kind of weird or gross, but they made strong enough feelings that they felt, their committee felt compelled to pull it. So, yeah, we don't blame the committee for who they are. We all have committees in our lives trying to protect us. We just don't care to hear what they have to say, right? Because they are going to water it down into mediocrity, and we deliver world-class service. There is no mediocrity in our world. If it is, then we change it. Right, and it's very rare that we've ever had to make any adjustments after we've kind of locked an idea down and tested it through a long timeline.
No, that's awesome. And I think you're completely right. Is people can either make decisions or get so hung up to not make a decision just based off of the outliers and forgetting the masses and worrying about the one, well, what if. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, you have to say, like, yeah, there's going to be that outlier, there's going to be that one person, but like, we don't care, we're going to still keep moving forward. And I love what you said. Like, you got to have some courage to do it. And so, yeah, being bold and being courageous to make a stand and differentiate yourself, that's amazing. That's what it's all about.
Well, what most people don't relate to courage is what is required to be courageous, and that's vulnerability. You have to be willing to be vulnerable, because if you're not willing to be vulnerable, you're not willing to be courageous. You're just willing to be pedestrian. And we're not interested in working with pedestrian brands. We're looking at companies who are really going to grow significantly with us, and vice versa, because we get paid by growth. We don't get paid by sitting still and working with small companies that say small.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're reminding me of that vulnerability. One of my favorite campaigns is probably 15 years ago or so, but when Domino's was redoing their rebrand and like addressing their specific issue. So like, hey, our pizza, our delivery guy, they sucked. Like they didn't get it here on time. And when you open the box, all the cheese was on the top of the box. Like, and they put that in their commercial, and they're like, we're going to do better now. So they're being vulnerable. They're being courageous to address the problems and the what everyone had come to know them for. And hey, here's how we're going to make it different. And like, it's still to this day, 15 years later, is memorable to me. But you know what? I'd never ordered Domino's pizza before. But you know what? I ordered my first Domino's pizza that weekend, just because they addressed the thing. And then they talked about like, and how we're changing our service and our delivery. We're also changing the flavors. Here's why you should try it. So putting that creative spin, but being courageous and vulnerable, addressing it so that they can write their own narrative.
That's it. That's it. And any company can do this at any time. Home service companies can change their warranties and guarantees to actually have weight and impact. Most of them are watered down nonsense that have been regurgitated from a bunch of best practice groups for the last 20 years. Let's talk about things that customers actually care about, and let's talk about them in a way that they get remembered, so that when the trigger happens, you get the customer, right? We have to stand out. If we're not standing out, we're just amongst the sea of sameness.
That's right. That's right. Well, Ryan, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners, for our lemon heads here?
You know what? A lot of people are stressed out right now. There's a lot of tension across the world right now because of the behaviors that economics have brought through to us, and this too shall pass. Right? We are seeing all of our customers, bar one or two, really see healthy growth. Right, not the year over year doubling that they had hoped for as they continue going forward as they get bigger, but certainly healthy growth from a smaller subset of leads. They're making more out of those leads. And that's one of the biggest things that brand is going to bring to the table. When people know, like, and trust you versus pick you from an unknown list as an unknown supplier, you have a much higher chance of converting on the same day at a higher average ticket and profit. And that's the big work that branding doesn't get recognized for enough, is that a good lead, a good customer, a relational customer, a customer that values their time more than their money, a customer that is interested in you helping them out and making the problem go away. Those are the customers who are desperately and hungrily looking for somebody that stands for something. So stand for something in your advertising. That's your brand.
Well, and the brand is definitely the hare approach, or the tortoise approach, and the tortoise and the hare analogy. It's that slow and steady, but it's what will win out in the long run.
It is a long game, and I've certainly written an article about the tortoise and hare of advertising and how that serves us. You're absolutely right. The long game is the game to win.
That's right. Well, Ryan, how could people get in touch with you if they wanted to read that tortoise and the hare article, or even some more of your wealth of knowledge? How can people get a hold of you or read more about you and your work?
Sure. The easiest access to me is through my website. I have a sub brand called wizardofads.contractors, and that has very specific to home service blog articles. There's a few hundred articles on there that me and my partners have written. That gives you a rundown of what our process is. We have an FAQs that basically tells you exactly how it works with us. And I'm more than happy to get on a phone call, no charge, and really just dig into what you're doing in your branding and your marketing and your overarching strategy, and see if you're spending your money right, seeing if you're putting the money where it should be going, and if you're overspending in your market and if you're underspending, and all of the things that people worry about because they're not marketing experts. We have hundreds and hundreds of clients. We have data analysis that's very deep and detailed. We can give you some clarity very quickly about how you can pump the gas yourself, or bring us in to work with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that so much. We will be linking that website that he mentioned here in our show notes below. And so, as always, thank you for listening to another episode of From the Yellow Chair. If you would leave us a review, we would greatly appreciate that. You can follow us on all the social media channels. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.